Hello. So today I'd like to record a video to share some thoughts on the topic of consent. But before we get into the subject, I'd like to introduce it by giving some context on social arrangements that seem prevalent today, and also explain some dangers that we are facing as a society. What triggered me to record this video was a documentary on the news regarding, the green passport and having a vaccine certificate introduced to deserve the right to do things we used to do freely before. Like going to the restaurant, going to the theater, cinema, just simple things that take place in a group setting or public setting. Now, this idea concerns me very much because it seems that a lot of people do not grasp the entirety of what it implies, and also people don't seem to realize how this shapes the way we solve problems and the way we drive social dynamics, I guess, in what direction we are moving towards. And so for consent now, which brings us to this. Today, consent is an idea that is mostly applied to specific areas of life, but not all. Surprisingly, and even in the areas it's practiced, this is not commonly done in society today. An example of this is sex, where it has been brought to public attention in recent years that consent in sexual activities is just a priority. But still, when you look at the real world, if I may say, we see that still a lot of people don't practice consent, even in this area. And the thing is, in in a topic such as sex, which is very how can I say, it's very delicate to touch on because it's still taboo in our culture, at least where I live. But what people don't seem to realize is that there are many areas where we don't apply consent at all. And in fact, in most instances, consent is breached unknowingly. What do I mean by that? For example, attention. And an example I have for this is marketing. In very general, broadly, 100% of marketing is unsolicited. And so in marketing, basically, your consent for attention is breached almost all the time. When you watch a video on YouTube and it gets interrupted by an ad that you have to watch for at least a few seconds, your consent for your attention is breached. When you are on the streets and you see an ad, a physical ad on a wall, your consent for attention is breached. And this is this gets tricky because, see, today, because marketing is used as a tool to generate profit, it serves interests of businesses who are trying to make things work, right? So somehow it has been tolerated to use such means because it serves our interests, so we don't really consider the impact and consequences that it has on a macro level, systemically, like many other things. Anyways, so for example, when you see an ad, when it gets tricky is that when you see an ad on YouTube, for example, today marketing is done in such a way that your psychology is used against us or against you to match those ads with your current interest. So somehow, because you're already interested in something, it justifies breaching your consent for attention. And so because we see ads about topics that we are interested in, somehow it makes it okay. But is it really okay? Now, if you take away all this, all the algorithms, and you imagine that there wouldn't be any sort of filtering and matching the ads with your interests, I want you to imagine if you watched a video or let's say a documentary of something you're really passionate about, really interested in, and you look forward to watching it. And every 5 minutes into the documentary, it gets interrupted to show you an ad completely random that has nothing to do with anything you've been interested in or exposed to. For example, let's say you're watching a documentary on safari and animals in Africa, and you get randomly presented with ads about devices, electrical devices, and vacuum cleaner, or golf clubs, or helmets for people who wield metal. Now, I want you to imagine while you're watching this documentary, what would be your reaction if you would be constantly interrupted with ads that you're absolutely not interested in? What would be your reaction? How would you feel at that moment? Now, do you understand what I'm trying to say here? If you have no interest in an ad, in a content of marketing, our reaction is generally very unpleasant. It's uncomfortable, and we get mad most of the time, which, demonstrate it reveals basically the idea of consent in your attention. But what's dangerous today is that because the algorithms have been built to filter based on your current interest, somehow because it uses your biases against you, somehow we become okay with we unknowingly give our consent for attention because it's based on our interests. But it's really unhealthy to do that, and I hope you understand why. The consent is independent from interest, meaning that regardless of if you're interested in something or not, consent still applies. Now that I am thinking about that, this also applies in relationships, in seduction. So nowadays it seems that most of the time when we look at relationship dynamics between men and women, to name but two, or let's say more broadly, between two people who are attracted to one another, because they already have some sort of attraction, the notion of consent becomes blurred, meaning that somehow, because you're attracted to someone, we automatically accept behavior that we normally wouldn't if we weren't attracted. And some things, some initiatives that people take without asking consent first, we accept because we're attracted to that person. Do you understand that? Similarly for marketing and attention, because it's something we are interested in, somehow we forget about consent. But this is very dangerous, and we can also make parallels with this, with freedoms and rights, human rights and liberties being breached because it uses something that we are looking for, something that we are interested in, and governments and populations and communities uses those interests as and turn them into rewards to create a limitation to incentivize you to get the reward, where in the past there used to be no condition to get what you were interested in. But now what happens is, before we could go to the restaurant for free, it was unconditionally you could go. Today you have to wear a mask, you have to wash your hands, which I'm not criticizing. I'm just describing reality. Now all of a sudden we begin to have conditions to do things, and for traveling also, governments and entities in Europe want to introduce a green passport, so that before, when you could unconditionally travel and you could move around freely, now it becomes conditional, or it could become. Now, how do you feel about that? And governments are shaping laws that are breaching consent, and they justify it by, we are interested in some things to do, but because of an obstacle, now we are not given the right of consent to choose whether we accept the new law or the new condition that is being introduced. Now, I don't know how you feel about that, but personally it concerns me very much. But this could be a subject for another video. Mainly what I wanted to talk about in this video was to present you and to apply the idea of consent in other areas of life that we are not used to apply to, and to realize some detrimental and unhealthy practices that we've been conducting for so long that it has become norms now, and we just no longer question them. We no longer consider just thinking about what consequences those practices could have. If you're interested in more, you can like this video and subscribe, and we could explore other areas of life to apply consent and to question, but also other other ideas than consent. Thanks for watching, for the unity of humanity and the sanity of the earth.